Hi guys, welcome to my channel where we discuss anything and everything to do with mental health and psychology. In this video, we'll be going through KSA 11, which is fitness to practice and suitability at a personal level. So here they're just seeing your suitability and your fitness to be a therapist. So what you'll need in this section is similar to the next 3 KSAs, which is a self-statement that you write yourself and a referee providing a reference. So the reference in this section cannot be a countersigned self-statement. It needs to be something that someone who you choose to be your reference provides for you. Does that make sense? So what could be written in your self-statement? The first 4 points can be both written in your self-statement and your reference. So the first is related to pre-employment checks. So if you've passed your pre-employment checks, you will have these points. So it's a DBS check, criminal convictions, just saying you have no criminal convictions, and then your reference can say, from my knowledge, this person has no criminal convictions. So it could also comment on occupational health if you've passed all their checks, whether your employer has received references from previous employers, so that kind of thing. So anything that was done at pre-employment, that would go there. So what they're trying to see is when you actually qualify as a CBT therapist, whether you will be employable. Does that make sense? So second, I highlighted all the training I had been on, both mandatory and voluntary. And this is something my reference also commented on and just listed all the training that I had been on and whether it was mandatory or voluntary related to my fitness to practice. So my awareness of safety in practice, legislation, mental health, and Mental Health Act, Diversity Act, those kind of things, information governance, safeguarding, my resilience, and I've also been on resilience training, and my enthusiasm of finding trainings and using my personal initiative to be able to access trainings. And my engagement in, sometimes you have appraisals, so they also spoke about my engagement in appraisals, commitment to professional development. They also commented on my ability to form, maintain, develop and end therapeutic/helping relationships and working relationships. They also spoke about my ability to provide or use professional boundaries and personal boundaries, especially when interacting in working relationships or in therapeutic relationships. So working relationships are just relationships that you have with your co-workers and your colleagues. They also commented, and I also commented on this, that how I form appropriate working relationships. So if disclosure is therapeutically beneficial, I'll use it. If it's not and there's no purpose to it, I won't do it. I also spoke about working relationships and how I've not only got to know individual professionals, but I also went beyond that to get to know them as individuals and see them beyond their role, and appreciate their diversity, their views. And my reference also commented on my working within teams, my interactions within MDT, within multi-agency teams, and that's something that I commented on too. I also commented on, and my reference also commented on, my clinical judgment and my ability to work independently. So they commented on whether I can work in groups and my personal qualities that made me better suited to helping roles. Does that make sense? And something, my personal qualities that they've witnessed, if that makes sense. But in telling you what my references commented on, it doesn't mean that your reference has to also comment on these things. There is a guide provided by BABCP on their website, so I suggest sending that to your reference and they can use that to guide what they comment on, what they talk about, and just general guidance on how they could write your reference for you. Yeah. So the other things that I mentioned in this video will be things that I commented on myself in my self-statement. And again, if you don't think this is relevant, you think of other things that you want to comment on, feel free to do that, because a self-statement should be individual and it should be a reflection of you as a professional. So let's get straight into it. So I spoke about professional codes of practice and organisational codes of practice and how that's guided my practice. I also spoke about different professional bodies that have guided my practice, my values and NHS values, and how they've influenced my practice. Does that make sense? So there's so many guiding principles that I've adopted for my practice to make me fit to practice and suitable at a personal level. I also spoke about how my values and those ethical principles and those morals align to make me personally suitable to this role. I also spoke about my ability to assess and draw on appropriate knowledge and experience, and this includes my awareness of my limitations and how I went about to address those. So I know when to seek support, I know how to seek support, so supervision, and going on training courses, addressing that knowledge gap that I do have. But then I also know my limitations in terms of my role. So as an assistant, I'm not going to start practicing therapy on someone. I know that's not appropriate, so then I would refer to someone else, using supervision to keep on top of my awareness, because you're going to have blind spots and you need someone else to be able to explore that with and bring that to your attention. I also spoke about continued professional development and how that helps me to address my knowledge gap. Yeah, so it's just really important to highlight, you know, your professional responsibilities, and you also know your professional limitations, and you know the strengths and the limitations, and you just know what other professionals are doing. Does that make sense? So you're very aware of your environment, your team, and you're also aware of yourself and your limitations, both in terms of your role, because even as a CBT therapist, you are going to have limitations, and you need to be able to know when something is appropriate for your competence or your skills, and when something's appropriate for someone else's. Does that make sense? So that's like in terms of like therapeutic modality and things like that. So it's important to actually be aware of or having a broad knowledge and broad experience with different types of individuals. I also spoke about and highlighted my knowledge gained from academic courses and experiences, as well as supervision. So I really explored and explained how I gained my knowledge by taking a proactive and curious stance in terms of wanting to know about other professionals, about the academic courses where I learn about other professionals, and then working, shadowing other professionals and taking those opportunities to really learn, both in terms of therapeutic modalities, but also in terms of nursing teams, medical teams, doctors, psychiatrists. I actually know what they do and they're expert, what they're like expert in. But then I also spoke about how I'm aware that I don't know everything in the field, and I think that's a very much a strength in knowing your limitations and knowing where your expert knowledge lies and where it ends. Does that make sense? Because some people, especially when they're new into the field, they sometimes portray that they know everything, but it's actually good in admitting that you don't know everything. Because very early in your career, you're not going to know. Does that make sense? I also highlighted my ability to be able to problem solve, and my personal qualities that enable me to do that. So being innovative, being creative, and how, again, with my curious stance, I'm able to actually think about a problem more broadly. And again, when I don't know how to do that, I can reach out for help. So I can work independently, but in a very safe way. So it shows my fitness to practice, because I can work ethically, I can work in a way where I'm not going to be a risk, and I can also have personal suitability because I know when it's appropriate. to work independently and when it's appropriate to actually get a team around me. Does that make sense? Or just refer to someone else or another service. So then I'm really showing that I actually can use my own initiative in not only being able to seek experiences, but also being able to solve problems. And then I spoke about how I've actively sought training and the knowledge gap that it filled. I also spoke about how the trainings that I specifically found and what I gained from them, why I thought I needed them, and the impact it had on my professional functioning once I gained that knowledge. Does that make sense? So then I also spoke about my clinical judgment and how I'm able to justify and know the importance of being able to justify and back my decisions. I also spoke about the importance of taking ownership for my decisions and my responsibility and other people's responsibilities. So sometimes when you make a decision, it's actually really important to let someone else know, especially when you're an assistant or you're being supervised by someone in a assistant type role. Does that make sense? Or you're carrying out a assessment on behalf of someone. I also spoke about my responsibility, even as an assistant, to be able to take ownership and own even mistakes that I've made, because that demonstrates your fitness to practice. When you are very quick to, actually, I made this mistake, let me fix it and let me repair it, rather than pretending you didn't make it and just ignoring it, because that often makes situations worse. I also spoke about the importance to maintain fitness to practice. So I spoke about the importance of supervision, of self-care, especially when you're working in an emotive and challenging environment, to be able to actually admit that it is impacting you, and knowing when you need to take a break, knowing when you need to talk about it in supervision, and actually the importance and what makes you fit to practice. That goes back to the health checks as well, to admit when you and be honest about when you I don't think necessarily write in the form unless you want to, but just show your awareness of actually managing your own mental health, because I know it's a bit personal to write about if you have struggled, and if it's not something you feel comfortable sharing, I wouldn't share it, because it is very exposing and very, very vulnerable to do. When this process is vulnerable enough, that's not to discourage you from sharing it, but if you feel able to, then you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But you could talk about it very broadly in terms of managing your mental health, which is very important, because healthy therapists are more effective. Because if you're dealing with your own stuff, it's very difficult to help other people. It also shows that maybe you've gone through therapy and it's made you personally suited, in that you know what it's like, you know what it's like dealing with resistance, and it's given you a deeper compassion for people who've gone through therapy, because you've been on the other side. Does that make sense? You could talk about it in that way, what you've learned from that process, how it has made you more fit to practice because you're aware of yourself, your own beliefs about yourself, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, perfectionism, self-esteem, and how you've actually continued to work on it. You can also talk about how it's made you more personally suitable, so your level of compassion is deeper, you understand the importance of confidentiality at a deeper level, the importance of safety in sharing, things like that. And it not only in a therapeutic way, but also in terms of supervision, in terms of your working relationships. Actually, when you do share personal experiences, it's actually very important to meet the person with compassion, with empathy, and even when you've gone through an emotive situation like debriefs, for example, that could be very important. And also remember to provide examples. I still provided 2 examples at the end, even though I provided examples throughout, but I felt like 2 examples at the end really give you an opportunity to be able to provide a whole rounded experience, and I almost used them to summarise everything into 2 examples. Does that make sense? So summarising how all those qualities, all that knowledge that I spoke about all interact. So I spoke about one where I had limited knowledge and the impact of my limited knowledge and what I did to actually address that knowledge gap. Then I spoke and highlighted about the personal qualities that showed and how that makes me suitable to be a therapist. My next was the therapeutic relationship, forming the therapeutic relationship, ruptures and it ending, and the importance of each stage and the importance in that for recovery. So for example, in that example I highlighted how it's important to empower service users, and by empowering them they don't become so dependent on the therapeutic relationship, so feeling like, oh, the therapist is the reason I recovered. Instead of having that dialogue throughout therapy, it was more that your efforts, you practicing, because you can teach someone skills, you can teach someone knowledge, but it's their efforts that make them that knowledge stick and those skills be developed. Does that make sense? So giving them the confidence, giving them the ownership for their own recovery, and that gives them the independence that actually I did this and I can, even without my therapist, even without this support, I can continue to be as effective, and I don't need the therapist. I have the capabilities, I have the knowledge, I have the skills to be able to actually implement these skills because I've demonstrated it throughout the therapeutic process. Does that make sense? So obviously use your own examples. Just think of times in your practice where you have demonstrated these skills, and I think that will be good in terms of you're showing the intermeshment of all these qualities, because you can separate them when you're talking about them, but I think providing an example is good to show how actually all these qualities, all these knowledge, personal qualities, all these things interact to be able to make you fit to practice and suitable on a personal level. So that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully it was useful and it helps you on your KSA journey. We're nearly towards the end, finally. So like, comment and subscribe and share the video if you feel like someone else might be struggling with their KSA. I'm sure they will appreciate it so much, and so will I. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next video.